Okay, we'll start with the anatomy lecture, that is the anatomy of the pituitary gland, the thyroid gland, as well as the parathyroid. We'll study three endocrine glands today in this lecture, both the gross as well as the development of the same. Uh, so these are the objectives. So we should know the location as well as the parts of the pituitary gland, as well as its relations, as well as the embryological development. Then also the location, shape, relation, blood supply, and the supply of the thyroid gland, as well as the parathyroid gland, as well as their development, as well as congenital anomalies. All these we'll study in this lecture. So to begin with, as you know, the endocrine glands are those glands which produce their secretion and pour their secretion directly into blood. Okay, they don't have ducts, so they are also called as ductless glands. Okay, so they pour their secretion, those are called as hormones, right? So as you know, the endocrine glands are divided into major three types. One is the major endocrine glands, like as you know, the pituitary, thyroid, parathyroid, adrenal, as well as the pineal gland. All these are the endocrine glands. Along with that, sometimes there can be some masses of cells which acts as endocrine, like the islets of Langerhans in case of pancreas, which is called as the endocrine pancreas. Okay, those are nothing but the islets of Langerhans. Then we also have the testis and the ovary. Testis and ovary that also acts, produce their hormones and pour them directly into the blood. Okay, so these are called as masses of cells. These are not entirely endocrine gland, but some of the cells of those glands or the organs are acting as endocrine system. Sometimes individual cells act as the endocrine gland itself. Scattered cells which are present all over the body, especially one of the best example is the Aput cells, which is also called as the enteroendocrine cells, which individual single cell themselves, they can produce some kind of chemicals or hormones which will be released directly into the blood. Okay, so all these are the different types of endocrine organs. Okay, one is the major endocrine glands, as you know, the big large endocrine glands. Then there can be scattered cells which act as the endocrine. Sometimes individual cells also act as the endocrine glands. Okay, to begin with, the most important and the major gland, which is the master gland, we can call it as the master gland, that is the pituitary gland, which controls all other endocrine gland. This is called as the pituitary gland, or it is also called as the hypophysis cerebri. Hypophysis cerebri, that is the other name for the pituitary gland. So if you want to locate this gland, it will be it's a small oval shaped structure attached to the undersurface of the brain by the infundibulum. So if you see here, this is the brain here, this is the base of the skull, and near the base of the skull, below the undersurface of the brain itself, you can see a very small gland coming over here. So this is called as the pituitary gland. Okay, so it is connected to the brain by a funnel shaped structure. This is called an infundibulum. Here is the pituitary gland, and this is the funnel shaped infundibulum. So if you want to locate this gland, where do you exactly locate in the bone? It is present in the sphenoid bone. So this is the sphenoid bone here. As you know, the skull is made up of many bones. 22 bones are there, and one of the bone is called a sphenoid bone. Okay, so this is the sphenoid bone here with the sphenoidal ear sinus. This is the sphenoidal ear sinus, and this is the sphenoid bone. And just above that, you can see there is a depression called as sella turcica. Sella turcica is a concavity inside which we can see the pituitary gland kept well safe, because it's an important endocrine gland. It is covered and it is well protected by the bone, sphenoid bone, and it is present in a depression over depression that is called a sella turcica within the sphenoid bone. Now, if you want to study the pituitary gland, even though it is a very small gland, but it is a very important endocrine gland and it will be secreting many hormones. So to simplify it, we divide it into two parts, anterior pituitary and posterior pituitary. If you see this picture, so here you can see this is the posterior pituitary, this is the anterior pituitary. The large part, this is called the anterior pituitary, this is called the posterior pituitary. So it is primarily divided into two large parts, anterior and posterior. Okay, anterior pituitary is also called the adenohypophysis, and posterior pituitary is also called the neurohypophysis. This is the neurohypophysis, this is the adenohypophysis. The name itself indicates many things. Adeno means gland. Okay, so it is glandular, mainly the anterior part is glandular, and the posterior part is neuro because it is an extension from the brain. So a part of the brain has come down, so that's why it is called as the neurohypophysis. Okay, so it is glandular, it is more nervous posterior. Okay, so based on that, it is classified into two: anterior pituitary or the adenohypophysis and posterior pituitary or the neurohypophysis. Again, further it is classified, anterior pituitary is classified into three parts, that is called as the pars distalis, pars tuberalis, and pars intermedia. So this large part, this is called as the pars distalis. This pinkish area, this is called as the pars distalis. Then the pars intermedia, this green part, which is between the anterior posterior pituitary, this is called as the intermedia, pars intermedia. Then we have the pars tuberalis. Above we have the pars tuberalis. These are the three parts of the anterior pituitary: pars distalis, pars tuberalis, and pars intermedia. So here you can see the three parts. Coming to the neurohypophysis of the posterior pituitary, it is divided into two parts: pars nervosa and neural stalk. So pars nervosa is this part, which is pars nervosa, and above we have this infundibular structure. This is called as the pars neural stalk. Okay, neural stalk. This is the neural stalk here, and this is the pars nervosa. These are the two parts of the posterior pituitary, or it is also called as the neurohypophysis, which I said is an extension from the brain. So here is the third ventricle of the brain, optic chiasma of the brain. It has extended down into the pituitary. Okay, so this is the pars nervosa. So this is the broad classification. Once again, I repeat, pituitary is divided into two parts, anterior and posterior. Anterior part is also called as adenohypophysis. Posterior is also called as the neurohypophysis. Anterior pituitary is divided into three parts: pars distalis, pars tuberalis, pars intermedia. As you can see here, the three parts: pars distalis, pars intermedia, and pars tuberalis. Then the neurohypophysis is divided into two parts: pars nervosa and the neural stalk. So this is the pars nervosa and this is the neural stalk. So this is the broad classification of the pituitary, which will help us in studying the hormones better. Okay. Now coming to some of the important relations of this pituitary gland. If you want to trace if there is any carcinoma tumor developing from the pituitary, so how do you want to, if you want to operate, how do exactly you will operate? Where exactly is the pituitary? So it is deep inside, and we have to know some of the important relations, because if it is malignant and it can start compressing on other structures, or the adjacent structures can compress on it. Okay, here you can see here, this is the same thing seen from front, from here, this view. So this is the side view where you are seeing. If you want to see from front, then this is how it looks like. Here is the pituitary gland. Okay, now we want to see the relations. What exactly are the relations? Anteriorly, as we have seen, it is the sphenoid sinus, sphenoidal air sinus. This is the sphenoid one, as I said, within which this is present. And in the front as well as in the inferior part, you can see the relation of the sphenoidal air sinus. Here, if you see here, this is the pituitary, and below we can see this is the sphenoidal air sinuses. So anteriorly and inferiorly, we can see the sphenoidal air sinus. Posteriorly, we have the dorsum sella, basilar artery, and the pons. If you see here, this is the pons. This is the brain stem. This is the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. Mainly, the pons is in direct relation posteriorly to the pituitary gland. So we can see the pons, as well as there are basilar artery. If you see here, there are arteries going here, as well as even the dorsum sella. All these are in posterior relation. Superiorly, there is a thin diaphragm. thin membrane called as diaphragm. Okay, so this is called as the diaphragma sella. Just like diaphragm which separates the thorax from the abdomen, similarly there is a thin membrane here which separates the brain from the pituitary gland. That will be called as the diaphragmatic sella. Okay, then inferiorly, we have the body of the sphenoid as well as sphenoidal sinus. Sphenoidal sinus and sphenoid are both in the anterior part as well as inferior part. Okay, here what you are seeing is the inferior relations. Okay, then laterally we have a very important cavity filled with blood that is called as the cavernous sinus and its contents. If you see here, this is the cavernous sinus. So this is a venous sinus of the brain, which is present on either side. Along with that, there are many important cranial nerves which are in relation to the pituitary. Okay, so here this is the cavernous sinus, and there are very important nerves which are there. Okay, the third, fourth, and sixth cranial nerves, all these are in direct relation, as well as the internal carotid artery is also there. So it has very important relations around. So any enlargement of this pituitary gland due to tumors and something can compress on adjacent structures, as well as if there are any tumors or something from these adjacent structure, it can compress on the pituitary. So these relations are very important. Now coming to the blood supply, it is supplied by superior and inferior hypophyseal artery. The pituitary is also called as the hypophysis cerebri. So these arteries are called as the hypophyseal arteries, superior and inferior branches of the internal carotid artery. Internal carotid artery will give these two branches. The venous drainage will be into the intercavernous sinus. These are the cavernous sinuses on either side, which are connected by, this is the intercavernous sinus. So it will be, the pituitary will be draining directly into this intercavernous sinus. Okay, this is the blood supply of the pituitary gland. Now let's see how this pituitary gland has developed, because we said partly it is brain in extension of the brain and partly from the glandular structure. So how exactly it has developed to make itself like that, a unique structure? So the development of the pituitary, if you study, it is developing from two sources. One is ectodermal diverticulum called as the Rathke's pouch, and the second is the endodermal diverticulum, which is the infundibulum coming from the brain. So it is developing from two structures. That's why it has two parts. The ectodermal diverticulum or the Rathke's pouch, which grows superiorly from the roof of the stomatium. Stomatium means developing mouth, immediately anterior to the buccopharyngeal membrane. If you see here, this is the developing embryo. Okay, this is the brain part, and here is the mouth developing. This is very early stages of the development of the embryo. This mouth part, this is called a stomatium. And the GIT, the gastrointestinal esophagus, and the mouth are separated by a membrane here called a buccopharyngeal membrane. Still, they are not connected. There is a membrane there. Okay, from here, if you see here, there is an elevation from the stomatium going up. This is called as the Rathke's pouch. So this is pituitary is actually developing from the Rathke's pouch, which is coming from the mouth cavity. Okay, and then it goes up and it gets separated. If you see here, it gets separated. Then it develops into the anterior pituitary. Similarly, if you see the ectodermal diverticulum coming from the infundibulum from above, develops from the floor of the diencephalon and descends behind the Rathke's pouch. Diencephalon is a part of the brain. If you see here, this is the brain developing. A part of that brain gets down. This is called the infundibulum coming from the diencephalon, and then it doesn't break its connection. It's still in contact. Infundibulum grows down, and this develops into the pars nervosa, the posterior pituitary. Okay, so the ectodermal diverticulum coming from the Rathke's pouch forms the anterior pituitary, and the part which is coming from the brain, okay, that goes behind the Rathke's pouch, and it forms the pars nervosa. Okay, the Rathke's pouch lost its connection with the mouth cavity and formed the vesicle. So if you see, this part loses its connection from the mouth cavity and goes up and joins with the extension of the brain, that is the infundibulum. Okay, so that's why there is no connection from the lower part, but there is always connection from the brain. Okay, So these are the two parts of the which develops later into anterior and posterior pituitary. The cells of the anterior wall of the vesicle proliferate and form the pars anterior of the pituitary, as I said. So this Rathke's pouch will develop anteriorly. This part anterior wall develops to form the pars anterior. The upper end of the pars distalis surround the infundibulum process to form the pars tuberalis. The upper end, this part will form the pars tuberalis. So if you see here, this anterior part develops into pars anterior, the upper part develops into pars tuberalis, all parts of the anterior pituitary. The posterior wall of the vesicle remains thin to form the pars intermedia, but the posterior part of this vesicle doesn't develop and it forms the pars intermedia. So these are the three parts of the pituitary developing from Rathke's pouch. Coming now from the extension of the brain, that is infundibulum here, has differentiated into the stalk and pars nervosa of the pituitary gland. The part which descend down that form the pars nervosa, and the part which is connecting the brain to the pars nervosa, that becomes the stalk. So this is how the pituitary gland develops from the Rathke's pouch, which develops the anterior pituitary, and the infundibulum coming from the diencephalon of the brain. Okay, so that was about the pituitary gland. Now going to the next important endocrine gland, that is the thyroid gland. Thyroid gland, as you know, it is present in the neck. It consists of the right and left lobes connected by the narrow isthmus. So it has two lobes, right lobe, this is the right lobe in the neck, this is the left lobe, and these two are connected by the isthmus. Right lobe and left lobe connected by the isthmus. This is how it looks like, okay, in the neck, just in front of the larynx. This is the larynx here and trachea. So just in front of the larynx and trachea, you can see this gland called as the thyroid gland present in the neck. It has two lobes, right and left lobe connected by the isthmus. Each lobe is spear-shaped with apex and the base. If you see, each lobe is spear-shaped with the apex on the top and the base. It looks like a pyramid with the apex on the top and the base below. The apex rests on the thyroid cartilage. If you see here, this is the thyroid gland, and above that, this is called as the thyroid cartilage. So the apex lies on the oblique line. This is called as oblique line of the thyroid cartilage. The base reaches the level of the fourth or fifth tracheal ring. These are the trachea. This is the trachea here. These are called as tracheal rings. So the base goes up to the fourth or fifth tracheal ring. So this is the extension of the each lobe on right and left side. The isthmus crosses in front of the second, third, and fourth tracheal rings. If you see here, this is the isthmus connecting the right and left lobe. It will be slightly higher up in the second, third, and fourth tracheal rings, but the base can go up to the sixth tracheal ring. Okay. The pyramidal lobe may project upwards from the isthmus. If you can see here, there might be an additional lobe coming from the isthmus. This is called a pyramidal lobe. Pyramidal lobe coming. This is an additional lobe coming from the isthmus. It might be present or it might not be present. Levator glandular thyroid is a fibrous or muscular band connecting the pyramidal lobe to the hyoid bone. If you see here, this is the hyoid bone here. So this hyoid bone is connected to the pyramidal lobe by a band here, not shown here. So it is called as usually it is a fibromuscular band called as levator glandular thyroidea. So this is important connection because whenever the thyroid moves, the thyroid gland also moves. This is very important clinically to especially see whether this any mass coming from the thyroid gland is coming from the in the neck. Any gland, any mass coming from the neck is on the thyroid or not. So for that, ask the patient to swallow, the thyroid bone moves. If this also moves, then the mass is from the hyoid, from the thyroid gland. If not, it might be from some other structure. Now coming to the relations, some important relations of this thyroid gland. If you see here, this is the picture showing a thyroid gland in the neck. So what are the anterior relations? Anteriorly, it is covered by a lot of muscles here. If you see, it is hiding behind these muscles. What are the muscles? One is called as the sternothyroid. Sternothyroid. thyroid. So thyroid is the thyroid cartilage. So here is the thyroid cartilage. So there is a muscle coming from the sternum to the thyroid cartilage. Then superior belly of the omohyoid. This is the omohyoid muscle. It has superior belly and inferior belly. Superior belly covers the thyroid gland. Then the sternohyoid, one more muscle coming from the sternum going up to the hyoid bone. This is called a sternohyoid. This is the sternothyroid and the omohyoid. And the anterior border of the sternocleidomastoid muscle. There is a muscle here in the neck, which is strong muscle called as the sternocleidomastoid. This is cut here. If you see, this is the same muscle. It will cover the whole this part and goes down. Okay, so it is cut here so that you can appreciate the deeper structures. Okay, so these are some of the muscles which are coming covering the thyroid gland from anterolaterally. One is the sternothyroid, superior belly of the omohyoid, sternohyoid, as well as the anterior border of the sternocleidomastoid muscle, this muscle here. Then going to the posterior relations, we should know some of the very important structure. One is the carotid sheath. There is a sheath here. So if you see here, this is the thyroid gland. It has been elevated so that you can appreciate the structures which are behind. So what are these? One covering here, which is not shown here, there is something called as carotid sheath, within which there are three important structures. One is the common carotid artery, which you are seeing here. This is the common carotid artery. Then the internal jugular vein. This is the internal jugular vein. Then the vagus nerve. These are the three structures which are covered by a sheath called as carotid sheath. So the three structures are shown here, but not the carotid sheath. It is a round sheath covering the common carotid artery, internal jugular vein, as well as the vagus nerve. So if you see, this is the cross section of the neck. If you see, taking section of the neck here, so this is how you can see. So here, if you see, this is the thyroid gland. Behind that, there is a sheath here. This is called the carotid sheath, covering the internal jugular vein. This is the internal jugular vein, common carotid artery, internal jugular vein, as well as the vagus nerve. All these are covered by a sheath called the carotid sheath, which is shown. This is the posterolateral relation. So this is a very important relation because there are three important structures which are very important clinically. Then medially, if you see medially, there is in the middle, we can see this is the trachea as well as the larynx. Then the pharynx, all these will be together here. Then the esophagus, if you see, this is the esophagus. Then there is a nerve called the external laryngeal nerve as well as the recurrent laryngeal nerve. So these are some of the important medial relations of this gland, that is the thyroid gland. You can see here, this is the thyroid gland. And superficially, anterolaterally, we have seen these muscles: sternocleidomastoid, sternohyoid, sternothyroid, omohyoid. All these are the anterolateral relations which are seen here. Here you can see all the three: anterolateral relation, medial relation, and posterolateral relations. Relations of the thymus, the isthmus, sorry, the relations of the isthmus, which is connecting the two lobes, that is the isthmus. Anteriorly, we have the sternocleidomastoid, sternohyoid, anterior jugular vein, fascia, as well as the skin. All these are here. This is the internal jugular vein. These are the muscles. Okay, then the skin, fascia, everything will be here. Posteriorly, we have the second, third, and fourth rings of the trachea, which we saw. It is sitting on the tracheal rings. So those are some of the important. This is the isthmus here, anterior relation and posterior. The posterior relation we already seen that it will be sitting on the second, third, and fourth tracheal rings. Now coming to the blood supply, it is supplied by, because all the endocrine glands are highly vascular, this is also highly vascular. It is supplied by three arteries. One is called the superior thyroid artery. This is the superior thyroid artery. Then we have the inferior thyroid artery on either side. So there are two arteries on the right side, two arteries on the left side. Then along with that, there can be an additional artery called the thyroidea imma artery, which is not shown here. So you can imagine there are two arteries on the right side, two on the left side. Together, they form four arteries. Sometimes there can be an additional artery called the thyroidea imma artery coming directly from the arch of aorta. This is the aorta here. Okay, so these are the arteries supplying the thyroid gland, right and left inferior thyroid artery, right and left superior thyroid artery. Arteries, they anastomose. These arteries connect with each other. That is called anastomosis over the surface of the gland, and sometimes there can be additional artery called the thyroidema artery. Then drained by three veins on each side, right, left, superior, middle, and inferior thyroid vein. If you see here, there is the superior thyroid vein, then we have the inferior thyroid vein, and there is middle thyroid vein. So superior, middle, and inferior, these are the three veins. Arteries are two, superior and inferior, but the veins will be three on each side. So it becomes 6 veins and 4 arteries. Coming to the lymphatic drainage, it will be draining all the structures in the neck, should drain finally into the deep cervical. So this also drains into the deep cervical lymph nodes. Nerve supply is by the superior, middle, and inferior sympathetic ganglion. There are 3 autonomic ganglions in the neck called a superior, middle, as well as the inferior sympathetic ganglion. So it will be supplied by these 3 ganglions coming from the cervical sympathetic nerves. Now coming to some clinical importance of this gland, that is the thyroid gland. There are 2 main arteries, as we saw, supplying the thyroid gland, are in close relation to very important nerves that can damage during thyroidectomy operation. Thyroidectomy is the operation done to remove the thyroid gland in case when the gland has grown to a very large extent, in case of the either in case of the thyroiditis, or in case of the thyroid carcinomas, something like that. Okay, so especially at that time we do thyroidectomy. So when we do thyroidectomy, even though it is present in the neck and it is can be easily approached, but there are very important relations which we should remember. If not, we can totally create a lot of problems for the patient. So what are these close relations? For the superior thyroid, it is directly related to external laryngeal nerve, which supplies the cricothyroid muscle, a very important muscle which helps in the speech as well as in breathing, opening of the larynx. Okay, so this is a very important muscle for the larynx. So if you are doing the thyroidectomy, you should be very careful when you are ligating the superior thyroid artery, because it is in close relation to the external laryngeal nerve, which is supplying the cricothyroid muscle. If not, you can damage it and lead to a lot of complication. The terminal branches of the inferior thyroid artery are related to the recurrent laryngeal nerve. Inferior thyroid, superior thyroid is related to external laryngeal. Inferior thyroid is related to the recurrent laryngeal. What will happen if we damage them? Damage to the external laryngeal nerve when ligating the superior thyroid artery results in inability to tense the vocal folds, and there can be hoarseness of voice. The voice becomes very hoarse, and the vocal folds cannot close. Okay. The second, if you are doing surgery on the ligating the inferior thyroid artery, so if we bilateral complete section of the recurrent laryngeal nerve when you're ligating the inferior thyroid artery results in impaired breathing and loss of speech. So totally there will be impaired breathing, no breathing at all, and there might be loss of speech. So can be very dangerous to the patient. So when you are ligating the inferior thyroid artery, should be very careful to see for the recurrent laryngeal nerve and get separated. If not, it can lead to stoppage of breathing as well as loss of speech. Then the gland is surrounded by a sheath. We have already seen it is surrounded by a sheath, as well as posterior there is a sheath. The sheath is derived from the pretracheal layer of deep cervical fascia. The sheath attaches the gland to the larynx and trachea. This explains why the thyroid gland follows the movement of the larynx. If you see here in this section, you can see there is a sheath around. This is the pretracheal fascia covering the whole of the gland. It is not only covering the gland, but also trachea and the esophagus. So whenever the trachea moves, this gland also moves, because it is all covered by the pretracheal fascia. So this is important. This explains why the thyroid gland moves when the larynx is moved during swallowing. Any pathological neck swelling that is part of the thyroid gland will move upwards when the patient is asked to swallow. As I said, if you want to confirm whether this any mass in the neck is coming from the thyroid gland, Ask the patient to swallow. If it moves along with swallowing, then it is from the thyroid gland. So if it doesn't move, then it might be because of some other mass coming from other structure. Okay, so that is a very important item which we can easily identify clinical assessment. Now coming to the development of the thyroid gland develops as an endodermal diverticulum in the midline of the floor of the pharynx and the tongue. So there is a structure called as tubercular impar on tongue. This is the tubercular impar and the capula. And in between there is an endodermal thickening from the tongue. This is the tongue here. So that will invaginate down. So it is going down and this develops into the thyroid gland. This is a very important structure coming from the tongue between the tuberculum impar and the cupula, which invaginates down and goes all the way into the neck. Okay, so the diverticulum grows inferiorly in the midline of the front of the neck and is called the thyroglossal duct. Initially, it is called a thyroglossal duct. Later, it develops into gland. As development continues, the duct enlarges and its distal end becomes bilobed. So as you can see, it descends downwards, and the lower part becomes bilobed, and that will start developing into the gland. The duct becomes solid cords of cells, and as a result of epithelial proliferation, the bilobed terminal swelling expand to form the thyroid gland. As I said, these terminal swellings become the thyroid gland. The thyroid gland now migrates inferiorly in the neck. By the 7th week, it reaches its final position in relation to the trachea and larynx. As you see, so it will descend downwards all the way into the neck by the 7th week of intrauterine life. The thyroglossal duct degenerates and its site of origin marked by foramen cecum. So this whole now duct will disappear or degenerate, and it remains as a marking in the tongue as called as the foramen cecum. Foramen cecum. If you study the tongue, at that time you see there is a foramen cecum. This is nothing but the development of the thyroglossal duct and thyroid gland. Sometimes this duct doesn't disappear, then leads to lots of congenital anomalies. So what are the anomalies? One is incomplete descent of the thyroid. As we said, by the 7th week, it will descend into the neck. Sometimes it doesn't descend. So it might remain in the tongue or in the tract somewhere here. So that leads to incomplete descent of the gland. Okay, so sometimes you see here in this picture, the thyroid gland has grown within the tongue, so it has not descended down. Okay, sometimes there can be ectopic thyroid tissue. So sometimes this thyroid gland might grow somewhere else and it might grow there. So that is called the ectopic tissue. Sometimes there can be persistent thyroglossal duct. As I said before, this thyroglossal duct disappears totally. It remains as the remnant. Sometimes it might remain persistent throughout. Okay, this becomes the thyroglossal duct. Sometimes a part of this duct might remain as cyst. These are called the thyroglossal on the path. So you can see this is the thyroglossal cyst on the path. Sometimes they remain as small swellings in this path. Sometimes there can be thyroglossal sinus. Sometimes it can remain open and it leads to sinus opening. Sinus means opening on one side. Okay. And sometimes there can be agenesis of the thyroid. Sometimes there can be total agenesis, no development of the thyroid gland itself. Okay. Okay, so these are some of the different types of congenital anomalies we can see. So this is the picture showing you the thyroglossal cyst here. Okay, now going to the final gland, we have studied the pituitary thyroid, and now there are very small glands behind the thyroid. These are called the parathyroid gland. So this is the picture. If you see from behind the thyroid gland, this is how the thyroid gland will look like. So within this posterior border of this thyroid gland, you can see small swellings here, 4 swellings. These are called the parathyroid glands. They are oval shaped 4 bodies measuring about 6 millimeters, very small. They are closely related to the posterior border of the thyroid. This is the posterior border of the thyroid gland, and there you can trace these masses, which are called the parathyroid gland, lying within the facial capsule. The fascia, which is covering the thyroid gland, also covers the parathyroid. The 2 superior parathyroid at the level of the middle of the posterior border of the thyroid gland. The two superior parathyroid will be in the middle of the posterior border. The 2 inferior parathyroid usually lies close to the inferior pole. So the lower inferior parathyroids lies nearer to the inferior pole of the posterior border. Okay. Coming to the blood supply, it is supplied by the same arteries, veins, as well as the lymphatic drainage, nerve supply, just like that of the thyroid. If you know the thyroid, the blood supply, nerve supply, lymphatic drainage, then you know the same is for the parathyroid also. So the same arteries, that is the superior and inferior thyroid arteries, supply the parathyroid gland. Venous drainage is by similar superior, middle, as well as inferior thyroid veins. Just like the thyroid is drained by the supplying and drained by the draining the parathyroid also, same arteries and veins. Lymphatic drainage is also same. It will be into the deep cervical lymph nodes as well as the paratracheal lymph nodes. Especially you should know the deep cervical, both for thyroid as well as for the parathyroid. Nerve supply, in case of the thyroid, it is supplied by all the three sympathetic ganglia, superior, middle, and inferior. But in case of the parathyroid, because they are very small, they are either supplied by superior or middle cervical sympathetic ganglia. That is the only difference. If not, most of the things are similar. Only difference is this is the thyroid will be supplied by all the three superior, middle, and inferior cervical sympathetic ganglion. But in case of parathyroid, it is supplied only by the superior or middle cervical sympathetic ganglion. Now coming to the last part, that is the development of the parathyroid gland. Now you should know the development of the thyroid gland. We have seen the development of the thyroid gland. It is coming from the foramen cecum, coming from the tongue and descending down into the neck. But in case of the parathyroid, they have slightly different development. The two superior parathyroid develops from the fourth pharyngeal pouches. Pharyngeal pouches are those pouches from where the neck part will develop. Okay. So pharyngeal pouch, the third, especially the fourth pharyngeal pouch. So the superior thyroid, parathyroid will develop from the fourth pharyngeal. What is the fourth pharyngeal pouch from which the superior parathyroid will develop. The two inferior parathyroid develops from the third pharyngeal pouch, but the inferior thyroid will develop from the third. Usually it should be the third should develop into superior and the fourth should develop into the inferior, but here it is reverse. The fourth develops into the superior parathyroid, and the third pharyngeal pouch give rise to the inferior parathyroid. So the inferior parathyroid will develop from the third pharyngeal pouch, descend downwards and go to the posterior border. So the two inferior parathyroid develops from the third pharyngeal pouch in association with the thymus gland. So thymus is also developing the same, and it also descends along with the parathyroid. The thymus gland migrates from the neck to the thorax. It pulls the superior parathyroid to a lower level than the inferior parathyroid. The parathyroid becomes attached to the back of the thyroid gland. As we can see here, they descend and then get inserted to the posterior border, and so that's why we see them usually on the posterior border of the thyroid gland. So this is all about this lecture, which is about the endocrine system, mainly dealing with the pituitary gland, the thyroid, as well as the parathyroid. So if you have any questions regarding this, you can directly ask me.
No, doctor.
Is it clear? Any part is difficult?
Clear.
Clear. Okay. So anytime any questions you have, you can directly contact me and you can ask for the same. Okay.
Thank you, doctor.
Okay. Thank you very much.